Hello everyone, I'm Justin, and for today's video, we're getting into the mind of killer. Literally. Play the music. Today, we are joining the brilliant detective in uncovering all the mysteries that torment the minds of killers. So first, let's talk about what this anime is all about. Id Invaded, or ID Invaded, I was never sure how was the correct pronunciation, follows the story of Najisago, a renowned detective now in prison, as he enters different Id wells of various serial killers. There, he is transformed into the brilliant detective Sakaido, who is tasked with finding the killer of a mysterious girl called Kaeru, who always appears dead the moment he enters each world, giving hints on who the killer is and how she died. All while trying to find the mysterious John Walker, who appears in most of the wells of serial killers, hinting that he is the one that turns them into killers. With that premise, let's talk about the anime, the good, the bad, and its ending. There will be major spoilers ahead, so if you haven't watched this anime yet, I recommend you to give it a try. With that said, let's move on to our first point. I think a thing that most animes fail to understand is the pacing. Sometimes everything is moving way too fast that you don't even know where to look at. Other times, there is not enough stuff to do, so we end up getting some fillers or fan service. So I was really happy with the way NAS Studio went on to make this anime. That, for those who don't know, is an original anime with no prior manga or light novel to adapt. In just 13 episodes, we get introduced to this not too distant future and how everything works. We move on to present the main antagonist as well as some proper villains, and of course anti-heroes, who will stick with us until the end of the show. Some revelations and plot twist, and finally a proper ending. I highly praise the first episode for providing us with a really interesting plot and a series of shots that were amazing to look at, as we get to see Sakaido placing his body back together and using the advantages of his body to first connect the parts of the house and then the whole city to find the clues necessary to uncover the killer. That single scene got me so intrigued in the show that I was eagerly waiting for every week for the next episode to come. I also want to praise the Perforator, as I think his character was really well thought. The idea of a guy who decides to drill his own head and wants people to understand why he did it by performing the same action onto all his victims was a really interesting idea, as well as his plot twist at the end of episode 10, but we will talk about that later. I also feel that the uniqueness of each well is what made everything interesting to watch, as you never knew what you were getting into. A world divided in parts, a burning building, a world where lighting strikes into tiles, a desert, and so on. This change of pace in every episode showed the creativity and unlimited possibilities that make me love animes. On another note, Narishisago's backstory is really heartbreaking, and before we get into details, this is my last spoiler warning, as this will show major spoilers. You see, Narishisago was a detective following the trails of the Challenger, a serial killer who beat all his victims in a boxing match, no matter if they were black belts or small girls. And unfortunately, one of his last victims was Narishisago's own daughter. Later, his wife, devastated by her daughter's death, decides to also suicide, leaving our detective all alone with a thirst of vengeance. He finds the Challenger and kills him before the police arrives, thus going to prison and becoming Sakaido in the process. But in one of the subplots of this show, both Narishisago and another detective are sent into the well inside a well, in which they go back in time before all of this happened, and we get to see Narishisago reunite with his family and taking vengeance on the Challenger before he can reach his daughter. At the end of that well, we had a really beautiful and emotional sequence showing all the moments that Narishisago spent with his family portrayed in the pictures inside his room, telling goodbye to his family just before he leaves this world. One last thing to mention is the ending song of this anime. I don't mean to say that the intro of the anime is bad, but usually they tend to be better than the endings. But in this case, we get the biggest banger of all endings, Other Side by Miyabi, which for some reason didn't got nominated for a Crunchyroll award. I'm still salty about that. Okay, with that said, let's move on to our second topic. While the main villains of the show were really interesting, some of the secondary killers felt a bit lacking. The copycat of the Gravedigger and the Sniper felt really weak to me. And just for a moment after the third episode aired, I had this feeling that we were getting into the typical single episode find the killer plots. But thankfully, this got fixed in the episode 4, giving a longer runtime for the serial killers and enlarging the plot to give it a bit more meaning into each episode. On the other hand, while the show was airing, I heard a lot of people complaining that it was really obvious who John Walker was, and that all the hints were already there. And while I for myself was surprised by this plot twist, it felt a bit annoying that for some reason everybody already knew and was expecting that big reveal before it aired. Aside from that, one last thing to mention is that I felt that ending is a bit lacking, but let's talk about that in depth. So after leaving the subplot of the well inside the well, it is revealed that the perforator never lost his memories inside wells because of his hole in the head, and tells Sakaido his real identity, creating a storm in the process, hinting that Fukuda and John Walker were working together all along. It is revealed that the director of the department was John Walker, and for some reason his motives were to create a big well in order to capture more criminals, but by that process he also created serial killers? And he also killed a bunch of people himself? I don't know what kind of weird plot decisions they made. It is revealed that Kaeru is in fact a real girl who can bring people inside her head, and Walker created the well system using her mind. She is awoken, and thus everybody in the building are submerged into the well, but not before Walker killed himself while getting inside a cockpit, thus becoming one with the well system. Inside the well system, the perforator sacrifices himself to save a detective, and by tricking Walker into entering another cockpit, he goes back to the moment before he killed himself, and this time he's stopped and apprehended. On the real world, a detective using a kind of astronaut suit finds Kaeru and puts her back to sleep, promising her that they will find a way to save her. And thus, the show ends with Sakaido going back to the wells solving serial killer crimes. And while this ending is not that fulfilling, to me, what made this anime so interesting to watch was the road that took us there. Kind of how Evangelion was good up until the point of the congratulations part. You could say that it was the friends that we made along the way. And of course, that sequence that makes me cry still up to this day. But to be honest, I still think that it was kind of weird to not give a proper closure to Kaeru, but I heard that there was a sequel manga made after the show that could answer some of these questions, but I have yet to read it. And with that said, we come to the conclusion of this anime review. What did you guys thought of It Invaded? Was the big John Walker reveal obvious to you? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, see you guys next time.